Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 12th of March, my birthday. And on this edition, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
I woke up this morning and I just hated everything.
Audio Reviewer Ed Selley.
My bum's gone to sleep again, all down the left cheek.
And special guest, Mark Botwright.
What's that smell?
It's probably
if you can guess which
after eating all
film that
the
we're
veggies.
quoting that from, you're a better human being than I.
Yeah, there you go, that's a challenge. What film was that the guys were quoting from? Yeah, I wouldn't have got that from the quotes. I can see it on the runner, I wouldn't have guessed that. The smell, Mark, is the fact that I'm now quickly turning into a veggie, which I never thought would happen for a Scotsman. I had spinach twice yesterday.
Yeah, lovely.
You've got to be careful, because although that said, the things that you eat, probably not. But ironically, spinach for me is something I have to be careful with, because it is yet another thing that triggers gout.
Right, okay.
Yeah. It's, it's not a case of simply saying, "Oh, just lay off the rare beef,
the port and blue cheese."
Yeah, there's all manner of things that are issues.
Yeah.
But
we never heard that in Popeye, did we?
To be fair, he had deformities that meant that I think gout would have been the least of his worries, if I'm honest. But yeah, I love spinach.
Do you?
Yeah, I love it.
I don't mind it. Like I had it in some soup yesterday, so that's fine because it wilts away and it's nice and easy to digest. And I had it as a bed for other stuff to sit on top of. And again, you give it a little bit of heat and it's all right to eat. But I wouldn't say I like it. It's
well, you see, I would be honest. This is possibly not a prime cake club recipe, but I find that doing it in white wine and butter with garlic salt.
No, I'm not allowed that.
Absolutely fantastic. But
if I can put fry light on it, I'm fine. Anything else, we're having issues. That's
and creamed spinach, decent creamed spinach is just fantastic. But again, possibly not the route to a healthy and fulfilling lifestyle.
I'll tell you what. One of the best lunches I ever had was at Sony HQ. I think Steve was there. Yeah, you were there, Steve. I don't know what we were there for now. But anyway, it was at Sony, and it was a piece of steak, cooked properly, Ed. So I had mine's medium rare, on a bed of spinach with a bit of a dressing on it, and it was some sprinkled spring onion, and it was gorgeous. Really nice.
Well,
they get well fed at Sony. There you go.
Well, sometimes. You've got to keep them keen, I find.
Now that I've been at this thing for a few weeks now, and obviously went there last week because it was snowed off last week, so we all got a free week. Yippee! Haven't done it for a while now. When you look at the sketches that were done in various sitcoms and various sketch shows and that kind of thing, and the thing I keep coming back to is Dust on Little Britain. It's not that far away from the truth. These things, they're just. And this is why they're so funny, isn't it? Because they are just slightly removed from what actually does happen. But I've got to say, I'm finding it really enjoyable actually cooking and like I say, I mean, I've been trying stuff that I've never had in my life before. And the thing is, it's varied as well. So it's not like you're having to do the same thing, like having these shake diets and all the rest of it. So I'm really enjoying it. And the whole point was I wanted to try and change my lifestyle, and I think I'm getting there. If you've been following my Facebook, if you're my Facebook friend, you've been following it, I'll have been boring you to tears with my photographs of my food. But as you can see,
to be fair, they're well staged photographs of food.
I do photograph products and that kind of thing. So,
are we going to get a final photo of you holding your trousers out and looking off the camera?
What, as you sell your DVD?
Yeah,
before and after pictures.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll go to the oversized shop and buy a pair of 56-inch or whatever there, and just overemphasise the fact like they do in those photographs.
The AVForums diet.
Trust me, you don't want to go near that one.
Yeah, well, if any of our CESs are to go by, yeah, it's heart attack in the post eating that week.
Yeah, we don't really dine on the very best of American cuisine, do we?
Well, no. I mean, you end up sort of to think. I mean, you have serious vegetable withdrawal symptoms. It's quite painful.
Craving an apple.
But the problem is, you go to the supermarkets and it's finding the fresh stuff and the veg and all the rest of it in amongst.
Well, no, that Vons has actually got a decent fruit and veg section, but it's the supermarket is the wrong way round. It's at the end.
Yeah, it is.
Which is
so you can avoid it.
Well, it would appear that is something that is very much an option. there's a surprising amount of creditable veg in it. It's just squirred away. Because when I made the 8 tons of spaghetti bolognese,
which you ate 7 tons of.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. But no, well, there was decent veg for that. It was fine.
I've still got images of you finishing a mountain of a plateful and then going to the pan and emptying what was left onto your plate again, and having another mountain full.
Well, needs must when the devil drives. It's not like we could leave it in the fridge for the next person, is it?
Right, Mark. Yeah. What can we win?
Right. Nice segue.
Brilliant segue.
Yeah, well, I couldn't think of how to get out of that one, so on you go.
You can win Daddy's Home 2 on Blu-ray, and that one closes on the 21st of March. And you can also win Only the Brave on Blu-ray, and that one also closes on the 21st of March.
And do we have any previous competition winners?
None.
Good stuff. Right, so let's move on to hardware news next. Okay, so moving on to hardware news, it's TV heavy, so Ed can go to sleep for at least half an hour now. So we're talking about Samsung, LG and Sony, so let's go to Samsung first. They were the last ones to print out their TV line, because at CES they didn't announce anything, which is becoming a bit of a habit with Samsung. They more or less tell you about some of the technologies that might appear for the year, but they don't actually give you the model numbers until, well, we're into March, and this is us just getting the model numbers from their US launch in it was New York.
Yeah, it's New York.
So they've now released a lineup of TVs for the year. And I guess the disappointing thing here, Steve, although we still confirm it with the UK side of things, is that the Q9 looks like it's the only one that's going to have a full array backlight.
Yeah, certainly it looks like, for the UK at least, the Q9F, F meaning flat, is the only one that will have a full array backlight. But apparently in the States, the
Q8.
Q8.
Yeah.
But then again, rather bizarrely, Samsung have form here in terms of model numbers in the States don't correlate necessarily to model numbers in the UK.
Yeah,
and also, I've got to say, given that they've called the TVs the Q9F, the Q8F, and the Q7F, and that's what they were called last year, I can see an awful lot of confusion. How are you meant to differentiate a 2017 model from a 2018 model if they've got the same model numbers?
I think it's N after it, so F and then N, because last year was it M? Last year? So there's the letters that follow the Q9, so it'll be Q9F N, because I think last year it was Q9F M. I may be wrong on that one, but if I am wrong, I'll put it in the podcast forum. I'll put a post in there just to verify that. But I think that's the way it's done, Steve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I only ever remember or ever saw anyone refer to them as the Q number 9, 8, or 7, and then F for flat and C for curved. So I definitely see this being confusing. It seems like a strange thing to do, to not call it something else. They could have gone Q10, couldn't they? Or something like that. But anyway, what they've announced is the Q9F, so flat, which is a full array local dimming, as you said, Phil, and that's going to be coming in 55, 65, and 75-inch screen sizes. I'm
so glad there's a 55-inch screen size in there.
Yeah.
That's good to see that. It is. It's unusual because there's normally bigger screen sizes, but maybe sales haven't been that great for the flagship in the bigger sizes. Maybe they've seen that they need to bring the 55 in at that point.
There's also the Q8F, which is again a flat screen, 55, 65, and 75 inches, and then there's the Q7, which comes in an F for flat and also a Q7C for curved. So this is the only curved TV. I'm surprised they've even done this, because when we were talking to them at CES, I was like, any curved TVs? No, that's all gone. But there's still one curved range. So that's the Q7F or C, and again 55, 65, and 75-inch variants. So they seem to be fairly standard in terms of sizes. And there's also a new model this year, the Q6F for flat. So there wasn't a Q6 last year, so there's now a Q6. They've got obviously trying to bring in a cheaper QLED model.
Is this a promotion of one of the MU models from last year then?
Probably. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the screen size in 49, 55, 65, 70, and 82. That that correlates to the MU sizes from last year. But it's good to see if they are promoting one of those models. I mean, the main thing here And the thing that killed them last year was the pricing. The pricing was way off kilter last year in terms of the marketplace, certainly in the UK. This is going to be the big thing for them this year. It's absolutely going to come down to pricing. Yeah,
totally. Particularly, I think the flagship model last year was particularly expensive. And I know it's full array this time, and it wasn't last year, so that makes a big difference. But, if that's too expensive, it's going to be going directly up against the flagship OLEDs. And so pricing is going to be key. I noticed they haven't mentioned anything about pricing here. In fact, as a launch goes, it was a bit light on details, other than the model numbers and screen sizes and the kind of obvious stuff we knew they were going to be including, like smart TV functions and one remote controls and the invisible connection for the one remote box and that kind of stuff.
I don't think it's called smart TVs anymore. If you read the blurb, it's intelligent displays now. Someone's got a thesaurus for Christmas.
Intelligent displays with Bixby voice control.
I mean, the interesting thing here, again, it's something that we saw at CES, and that's AI, which is basically what they're calling their picture processing now, their scaling algorithms and so on. And this looks interesting, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, really cool to see how. I mean, the idea and the reason they're calling it artificial intelligence is because it's not just processing; it's processing that actually learns and adapts based upon viewing habits and content and this kind of thing. So, theoretically, that could be really interesting. And certainly, the demos that we did see did look really good. And so, there's a lot of potential here. I mean, the level of processing in some of these TVs now that they can stick into them is quite staggering. And the amount of processing that goes on behind the scenes with the images is, again, really impressive. We've seen it from a number of manufacturers, including obviously Philips were doing a big thing about their processing last year. And it is genuinely impressive. So how it adapts and evolves based upon your viewing habits and the content you're watching will be really interesting. So yeah, artificial intelligence is going to be a big word this year from all the manufacturers, I think.
I was just going to say, is the ambient mode, is that new this year?
I don't know if that they've always had, well, certainly on the higher end TVs, they've had an ambient light sensor. So I think they're referring to that. So basically, it detects that if you leave it on, what it does is it adjusts the image and the contrast based upon the ambient light in the room.
No, this is talking about almost like a kind of smart screensaver, displaying information whilst your TV's.
Yeah, I saw that as well. It's the screensaver thing, Steve. So where it cuts the power right down, but it'll still display an image. So it'll have the weather forecast, or it'll have one of your screensaver images on it, or something like that. It's a bit like what LG do with almost like their gallery mode type thing.
So just leave the TV on and not turn it off.
Yeah, and it runs at minimal amount of power. While it's in that mode. So that looks interesting. That was another thing that was featured. I guess the thing for me is the full array backlight, Steve. A lot of claims being made on this one as well, which I didn't sit in the demo because what we did was we split up when we were at CES to do different things. You went to this demo, the closed door demo with the anti-blooming feature. Now this sounds interesting because of the way that the pixels will be working.
Yeah, and it was actually quite effective in the demo, although they were a bit light on details as to exactly how they were doing it. But yes, they are trying to minimize the amount of blooming and also improve the viewing angles, which again is a big issue with VA panels in particular, which they predominantly use. And so that they did. I've got to say, in the demos that I saw, the amount of blooming and the off-axis performance was definitely better than when compared with last year's models, for example. So I definitely think they're on the way to improving it. Although, ultimately you do feel like they're doing an awful lot of development to try and make an LCD television look like an OLED television, basically.
But before that, it was the same with LCD to make it look like plasma. I mean, this has been the development curve of LCD has forever been going upwards to try and make it look like something else. But yeah, I mean that looks interesting because one of my bugbears with the test TV I've got in here at the moment, it'll be going back soon, I would imagine, is the KS9500 from 2016. It was 2016 model. So. That's one of the bugbears. When it switches into HDR mode, the blooming on screen, even looking directly onto the screen, is really noticeable. Especially stuff like the Amazon logo and that the animated logo and that kind of thing. It looks really, really bad. So if they've been able to really fix that issue to where it's almost, because the thing is, I'm not that interested about logos on screens with black backgrounds, that kind of thing, because you see that for maybe 5 to 10 seconds, maybe once every evening that you watch the TV. I think the main thing is when you're actually watching program content or you're watching a UHD Blu-ray or whatever, that's where it becomes an issue. And if they're able to control it as much as they can, then it can only improve things. It can only improve black levels as well.
Yeah, definitely. You're absolutely right. The big problem with blooming is definitely with HDR, where you've got the backlight as maximum setting, and it becomes really obvious quite often. Particularly if you're even slightly off axis, then it becomes a real issue. Yeah, this that's why they're developing it, basically to try and make HDR look better with less blooming and better off-axis performance. And like I say, in the demos that I saw, there was definitely some improvements there. Although I've no idea exactly what TVs we were seeing, because back then they weren't talking about model numbers, and it was all just technology. And so whether all that's going to filter down into, say, the Q9F, I don't know yet until we actually see the televisions. But in terms of HDR support, obviously no Dolby Vision, but there will be HDR10 Plus, along with hybrid lock gamma and HDR10. Although it would be interesting to see whether they could shed a bit more light on whether they're going to the updates for last year's models, which seem a bit slow in coming for HDR10 Plus. They were supposed to be doing that, but that doesn't appear to have happened yet. So it'll be interesting to see if they're going to stay true to their word in terms of upgrading. But the new models definitely support HDR10 Plus out of the box, so that's a new feature. Obviously, that's, I think at the moment at least, because there's no other content available, we're talking about apps in the TV. So at the moment, Amazon, being the only provider of HDR10 Plus that I know of, is in there. I know it's being added to the Ultra HD Blu-ray specs, but I haven't heard anyone announce anything about disc support at all, or players. Oh, well, there are player support, I suppose, from both Samsung and Panasonic. But I haven't heard any news yet about any discs being released with it.
Yeah,
or even whether you can deliver it over HDMI 2.0 is another interesting question.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting this year, and hopefully we'll be able to get some comparison stuff as the year progresses. QLED TV up against OLED TV, and then HDR10 Plus up against HDR10 and Dolby Vision. Hopefully that'll be things that we can look at as the year goes on, and as this technology starts to mature a little bit. You would have thought that in terms of disc releases, you would be hearing rumours about now for sort of Q3, Q4, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, think you'd hear something, and there hasn't been any mention of it whatsoever. Worse, in the meantime, there's been a lot more Dolby Vision discs being released, so including Disney are obviously coming on board now with their first disc, which is unfortunately The Last Jedi. But
you'll be buying it,
yes, yeah, obviously. But yes, all the studios apart from Fox now support Dolby Vision, and Fox obviously is going to be owned by Disney, so it's debatable what they're going to do going forward. So I don't know, it's interesting, but yeah, it's been very quiet on that front. I mean, obviously the players themselves have only just started to. Well, I don't think they've even started shipping them yet. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, the Last Jedi, I might have to force myself to buy that one just for testing purposes. You do realise, just to test what the Dolby Vision looks like and so on. I'm no interest in.
There are many other Dolby Vision discs you could buy instead.
Is there? I wasn't aware of that.
I think you'll end up warming to that film.
I don't think so. Right. So that's Samsung down. Let's do their arch rival LG. So they have announced their TV lineup, and they've also given some indication. Yeah, again, and given some indication, although it's only US in terms of pricing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they did actually announce their lineup before CES, actually. Before CES even started, they announced it. So we already knew what was coming. And I guess they just did this to tie it in with Samsung doing their announcement. They wanted to get theirs in too. So they re-announced their OLED lineup. So as we know, W8, G8, E8, C8, and B8. W, G, B, E, and C are all the same in terms of processing and picture quality. The differences are cosmetic. The E8 has a sort of small built-in soundbar. The G8 has the bigger built-in soundbar with the glass stand, with the soundbar sort of floating in midair in this glass stand. And obviously the W8 is the wallpaper TV with the separate unit. The B8 will be using the Alpha 7 processor rather than the Alpha 9, which is on the other TVs. So it's slightly different in terms of processing. But yeah, I mean, and the screen sizes, as we already knew, 55 and 65 for the B and the C and the E, and then 65 and 77 for the G and the W. Also, they've got their Super UHD TVs, the SK9500 and SK8500, and SK8000 as well, coming in screen sizes from 55 to 77 inches. And all these TVs will, for 49 to 75 inches for the LCD televisions, those are obviously going to be IPS panels. All the TVs, along with the Alpha 9 or Alpha 7 on some of them, processor. I think the Alpha 7 is on the B7 and the LCD televisions. They've also got, again, like everybody else, artificial intelligence enabled processing.
And what's the name of their system, Steve? Is that ThinQ? Is that what they were calling it?
Well, ThinQ is it's more of a, they've got sort of their Alpha 9 or 7 processor, and then they've got ThinQ, which ties in all the smart features. I think it's not just the artificial intelligence, or that might be part of it. It's kind of a overriding smart hub for all content to access the TV and use the TV as some kind of smart hub for your whole house. That's what ThinQ's about. But yeah, I mean, all of which, by the way, we knew from CES. So none of this is actually new. Like I said, it was kind of a re-announcement as much as anything. Yeah, and as you mentioned, Phil, they have announced some pricing for the States, although they haven't announced anything for the UK yet. And I get the impression a lot of the manufacturers are sort of waiting for, particularly if we're doing OLED TVs, they're waiting to see how LG price before they announce their pricing, because we haven't had any other pricing either for OLED televisions yet. So it's all a case of seeing who'll blink first, and then everyone else will fall into line, I guess. Okay,
and then we've got Sony, who I believe the XF90 is now, or is about to hit the shops, and the pricing's been announced for that one.
Yeah, so at least one manufacturer's managed to put some pricing out, which is a good start. So yes, the XF90, or I think it might be the XF9005 in this country, giving its full number, but that's going to be coming out. That's actually, as you say, Phil, I think that's hitting the stores right now, and pricing on this actually looks quite good, because they've got 3 different screen sizes. It's 55-inch XF90, that's going to be £1,699. There's a 65-inch XF90, and that's going to be $2,299. And then there's a 75-inch XF90, and that's $3,999. So I've got to say that is very competitive pricing, I think, for a full array backlit model with local dimming. I don't know how many zones yet, but we'll find out when we review it. But yes, a full array a full array backlight with local dimming, and all the new features. It's the only, so it's got the Extreme X1 processor, which means it can support Dolby Vision at some point, presumably, and also hybrid lock gamma and HDR10. And it has X-Motion Clarity, which is the new feature that Sony was showing at CES. And this is the only TV that actually in their range to feature it. Even the flagship ZD9 doesn't have this, but it uses backlight control combined with black frame insertion. So the scenes where, because when you add a black frame, it makes the image appear darker, because obviously you're literally putting a black frame between the 2 normal frames. So the image will dim. So what they're doing is boosting the brightness in the brighter areas of the image, analyzing the image and doing that, so that you still get the smoother motion and the nice deep black levels, but also you get a brighter overall image and brighter peak highlights. So actually, I've got to say, the demos that I saw did look really impressive.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing this one. I think this will be interesting to see, because they did the similar thing on their projectors, and black flame, for me it works, but I know for a lot of people it doesn't work, because they see the flicker, and it can vary from person to person. But for me, it certainly worked when they used it for the projector for motion and that kind of thing, because it doesn't add soap opera effect, so it improves the motion clarity and the perceived motion resolution without adding soap opera effect. But as you say, adding in a black frame, it does then sort of dim the brightness. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep the brightness levels without adding artifacts or anything else in on the back of that. It'll be interesting to see how it works. Yeah,
as you say, that's available now, or any day now. And there is also they've actually designed a soundbar to complement this particular TV. It's designed to go with it. It fits in between the 2 feet at the bottom. And they called it the HTX F9000, so it's similar naming convention, and that's actually designed to complement this television. So if you want to beef up the sound quality, Sony will be providing a complementary soundbar, which is something I think I'm surprised more manufacturers don't do that. It's like a really obvious thing to do, isn't it, to sort of design a soundbar to match your TVs?
You would think it was obvious. I mean, I think there probably wouldn't be any need for LG to have such a large lineup if you could swap around the sound bars and the stands you know.
Quite, yeah.
It'd make a mockery of what they're doing, but it'd be great if you could just, you know, choose your panel and then choose how you want to, where you want to wall mount it or put it on a stand and have a sound bar built in, or without a sound bar, or, you know, there's lots of options there that you could use, isn't there? So it's interesting to see manufacturers doing that. Now the big question is, Sony are sticking with Android TV. Have they upped the processing power? Is it still going to be laggy? Is it still going to crash on you? And is it as intuitive to use as the likes of LG's WebOS or Samsung's?
Yes, I mean, that is the one thing that puts me off Sony TVs, and to a certain extent Philips TVs as well, is I'm not a fan of the Android smart platform. I don't think it's particularly intuitive to use. I mean, it's got better, but the way that they seem to implement it on their TVs is like there are like 3 different ways of doing the same thing, and it becomes quite confusing. And as you say, Phil, it's been very buggy, prone to crashing, and underpowered on the television. So, because it is ultimately a platform that's been designed, an operating system that's been designed for smartphones, which tend to have a lot more processing power than a television does. And when you transfer it to television, quite often it struggles. So it'll be interesting to see if they beat up. I have a sneaking suspicion they haven't. But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for the time being.
Okay, so I think that's all the TVs sort of up to date with at the moment. We are moving into TV season now, so once we hit April, that's when we're expecting a lot of TVs to start hitting the market, because they've only got really April and May to get their sales in before the World Cup in the summer. And the World Cup is normally, there's normally a big spike in sales of big screen TVs for then. So you would imagine that we're going to get most of these through probably in the next 2 or 3 months, hopefully. Yeah,
absolutely. You're right. I mean, obviously there's a definite sort of deadline they've got in terms of wanting to get things in stores for sale, and that is May. Really, you want your TVs in the stores for May, so everyone can buy them ready for when the World Cup starts in June. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the manufacturers are all jockeying for position right now in terms of, when they're going to put them in stores, how much they're going to cost, because everything's based around. They don't want to launch too early and have to start dropping your prices in May because you've overpriced compared to everybody else. So we should get a lot more information about pricing and actual dates and availability over the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's what we're looking forward to. So you can stay tuned to the podcast. We'll update you as soon as we know. And of course, in between the podcast, have a look at the homepage. There'll be news stories up there as soon as we've got price and availability, all that kind of thing. We will run news stories, let you know that. And again, we'll come back to it on the podcast. Now, back in 2008, 2009, I'm not sure exactly when it was. My memory is a little bit hazy when it comes to these things. It was at least a decade ago. I spoke to a number of manufacturers and also gave presentations to a number of manufacturers, including Panasonic. We went down to their HQ at the time. I was there with Stuart and David McKenzie. And at the time, we were lobbying manufacturers to have proper calibration controls that worked in their TVs, because if you cast your mind back to then, we're back to the days of plasma and LCD, and lots of manufacturers producing LCD and producing their own panels, not like today's market where there's only a few suppliers. It was a vast market back then. We still had Sharp in the market, still had Toshiba, lots of brands like that were still producing TVs. So we went on a bit of a crusade, actually, about a decade ago, with the help in the US of other people pushing manufacturers over there, the likes of Joel Silver at ISF pushing manufacturers as well. And like I say, we gave presentations on calibration controls in TVs, and it's slowly improved over the last decade in terms of manufacturers providing controls, and the important thing, providing controls that work and enough processing power on the TVs to make sure that it works. And we've seen certainly companies like Panasonic, Steve, go to Hollywood. They suddenly realise that image accuracy is important, because you've got to remember there's definite cultures at play here as well, because with being a Japanese company, Japanese engineers are used to doing were used to doing things a certain way, and the TV engineers putting these TVs together didn't do it to the standards that we used in the West. And when I say the West, I mean the US and Western Europe, for cinema and so on, where it's D65, Rec 709 color and that kind of thing. When you go to Japan, I think it's D93, their white level, or it certainly was back then. Yeah. It was completely different, and they had a completely different way of approaching things. So it's good to see that manufacturers learning and taking that on board. And yeah, it's taken a decade to get to the point that we're at now. And I guess what I'm coming to now is that we're at the point where Panasonic have 3D lookup tables. LG are introducing that, obviously working with Panasonic. They're introducing that into their TVs. We calibrated 4 of the top TVs last year for a shootout event, Steve, and it was amazing to see how close they all were once they were calibrated. I mean, that's the way it should be. That's the whole point of calibration, is to get your screen looking the same or as close to what the director was looking at when they decided to go with the grade and all the rest of it, and made the choices on how the film should look. That's the whole point of calibration. But it's amazing to see where technology's come now. When you look back 10 years ago, and when you joined AVForums back in 2010, it's from where we were then to where we are now. Yes, we've lost some manufacturers along the way, and the market's consolidated a little bit in terms of who's making TVs and who's producing them and so on. But in terms of accuracy, colour accuracy, black levels, above black shadow detail, all the things that we were pushing for, THX getting involved as well with their certification program for image and display. It really has come on leaps and bounds, and we're now at the point now where the TVs can be auto-calibrated. It's quite a leap in the last 10 years.
It has. Yeah, I mean, the majority of TVs that we've seen in the last few years have had quite capable calibration controls, and the majority of TVs now, certainly from the big 5 or 6 manufacturers, are capable of delivering a very accurate image once calculated. Quite often they can be reasonably accurate out of the box, but they can definitely deliver a very accurate image once calibrated. But we're seeing a point now where, led by Panasonic, where they're moving televisions, consumer televisions, to a level of accuracy that it's bordering on professional. Yeah. We've already seen that they were making a big deal about it at CES, that which one is it? The EZ1002, which is a 65-inch OLED with the 3D lookup tables and the ability to actually load your own ones in as well. That is actually being used in professional post-production houses as a big screen monitor, basically, as a 65-inch monitor, because the level of accuracy is almost comparable to the professional Sony OLEDs that they use, which are obviously a lot smaller, and they want to look at something that's bigger. So Panasonic have made it their USP in a way, haven't they? They've made their image accuracy and calibration controls their USP. Others have begun to follow suit. LG specifically have clearly working in conjunction with Panasonic, because they've introduced very similar features, 3D lookup tables, and both of them offer auto calibration via CalMan. You connect over the internet as a secure connection. You put in a password at the beginning before you can access the television, and then you can actually run an incredibly accurate calibration in a matter of minutes. Which is really impressive when you see it in action. So it does the grayscale and the color gamut as well. And also, of course, you can do it for both standard dynamic range and high dynamic range, and even Dolby Vision in the case of the LG TVs. And also introduced last year, Samsung have now got Auto Cal as well. There's a slightly different in terms of the way you connect it to the TV. You connect it via, you have to use annoyingly, you have to use an RS-232 adapter, and it plugs into the 3.5 millimeter socket on the One Connect box. So it's not quite as elegant as connection. Apparently, the reason for that is that Samsung wanted something that was even more secure, because they were worried about things being hacked. But it's I prefer the sort of internet connection is a lot easier and a lot more elegant. You don't have to buy adapters and cables and all this sort of stuff. But the principle's the same. Once you're connected, you can then control the TV directly from the CalMan software, and it calibrates television. Again, that worked really well last year too. So these auto calibration controls are not only easier, because you just press a button, it does it for you, and you can set the tolerance level, so you can set the delta E's to whatever level you want. But they work really well as well. So you end up with a really accurate picture at the end of it. And then this year, I noticed that Samsung have announced not only have they've got auto calibration, but you can also control the TV now at 50, 75, and 100% saturation points, which is again something new. Taking television, these are the sort of things you used to see on £3,000 video processors, didn't you? And now we're seeing that kind of control on a domestic television set, which is really impressive. Yeah. And I suspect we're going to see more announcements too. CalMan wouldn't specifically say who, but they were dropping hints that another major manufacturer is going to come on board with an auto cal feature. So you can probably guess, given who currently does it and who's left.
Well, that'd be good, because they don't have a CMS at the minute, so that'd be interesting.
White.
To see that. Yeah, I mean, the way the technology's come on is fantastic, and like you say, I mean, talking back to just 5 years ago, you would have to spend £3,500–4,000 on a video processor to get some of these features. So, are we saying in the next 5 years you won't need a video calibrator? You won't need somebody to come around your house? Will it be that they'll sell you the probe, or the probe comes out of the TV and looks at the thing and it does it all itself. I mean, how far away is that?
I don't know. I mean, there's always a cost associated with this, isn't there? It comes down to margins in the end of the day. I mean, they could calibrate TVs before they ship them. I mean, obviously you'd have to allow for the room environment, but they don't, just because it adds to the cost of the television, and the margins are tight at the best of times.
Yeah, I mean, you've got your variances in components as well. I mean, it's a 10% variance on a production line, so even doing it on a production line, it would take so much time to do it because you've got the variances of the components and so on, and one component may be made by one manufacturer, and then they swap manufacturers halfway through, and the component changes and stuff like that. So there's always those issues. There's always those variances, there's always those issues with drift, that there's going to be at least 10% differences between one product and another product. But I guess what I'm getting at is, now we've got rid of the processor, the video processor, standalone, do we get rid of the calibrator eventually? And I know you're a calibrator, so you're going to try and protect your business interests.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, you got a choice. So if you buy the equipment, you're going to use it once or maybe twice, but you're not going to use it constantly. So it's a cost. It's a substantial cost of the television on top of that to do it yourself. Plus, you need to know. I mean, even if it's auto cal, you still need to understand what you're doing and how to use the equipment properly. What will probably happen is, because they're going to be much quicker to do than they used to be, they would take 3 to 4 hours. Now you could presumably do it in maybe an hour or hour and a half, depending on how many different settings you're doing and how many different inputs and this sort of stuff. But you can do it quicker. So you probably, if more people were interested, they could do more calibrations, but for less cost, I suppose, make them cheaper.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it'll be interesting to see where the technology takes us, because like I say, 10 years ago, we were lobbying manufacturers. They were not interested back then, and it's amazing in the space of 10 years how that's all changed. And it'll be interesting to see, like I say, half a decade to a decade from now, where we'll be when it comes to image accuracy and display technology, for that matter. The way things is moving, it could be completely unrecognisable in 10 years' time.
I'm sure it will be. Sure, it will be completely unrecognisable. But if you just go back, where we've come in the last 10 years, not just in terms of the calibration controls, but in terms of technology itself, in terms of what a TV is now capable of, and what it's going to be capable of in another 10 years, in terms of color gamuts, dynamic range,
3D
frame rates. Yeah, we'll have ultra stereoscopic 3D will be making a comeback, won't it?
It's funny, I found a video from 2009, I sent you the link to it, and I was watching it, and it's amazing how things have moved on since then. And this is an AVForums video from a Panasonic convention, and looking back at it, and you're looking at the design on the TVs, which was cutting edge back then, and it's like they're huge now, massive bezels on them and all the rest of it, so it is quite entertaining. And I suppose this is a perfect segue when we're talking about how technology's moved on and all the rest of it. Let's go to Ed, because Ed's done a great article. It'll be up on the site before the end of the month, and it's about one of my favourite little technologies, and that's CD. And I think the problem with CD, Ed, is, or maybe it was its greatest advantage, was that it was an absolutely fabulous invention that did everything right from the start. It didn't really need an upgrade.
Pretty much. It's perhaps the last time that there will ever be, it's the case where it was the dovetailing of being the most convenient and the highest performing format. So you could choose it because it was a great deal more reliable than cassette or vinyl. You could also choose it because it offered the highest possible performance. The piece in question is asking whether some recent announcements equate to the death of CD, and those announcements came out whilst we were actually in America, ironically, when Best Buy said that they were going to stop selling CDs in store from July. And essentially, I don't want to, I'll wait till the piece comes out and you can sort of run through it, but it breaks down what the significance of that is, and indeed how significant it is. And spoiler, not actually that significant for reasons that are covered in the piece. But excuse me, we're at a point where we have to accept that CD, it's not the end, It's not even the beginning of the end. The beginning of the end is realistically some time ago now. It is on a slow trail out to nothing. But the speed that that's happening at is open to a fair amount of debate. But it's then also I've had to remind people that CD is not able to pull the same stunt that vinyl did and go into hibernation and then come back, because the engineering commitments required to make optical mechanisms will always be not something that a cottage industry can do. So once we fall below a certain threshold, you'll then find that it all dies surprisingly quickly. And it's making sure that people are sort of set and prepared for that sort of aspect of it. But there's still a fair bit of life in the old dog yet. Don't start hoarding unplayed CD players just yet. You'll get a bit of warning when things are on the sort of final slide. I think is possibly the best way to look at that.
It is amazing though that this technology, look at how it's taken us and how far it's taken us since its launch, which was 79?
No, 80s.
Was it 80? Was it?
I think there are technology demonstrations from 81, commercially available from 82.
Right. Okay. But if you look at that, and then you look at how the optical disc has moved on since then, so not just in terms of CD, but then we had DVD and Blu-ray and UHD Blu-ray, and then before that there was Laserdisc, which was the same technology, the later Laserdisc technology. Let me just clarify that one, because there were different ways of doing it. There was even one with a stylus. But so it's amazing where the optical disc has gone, and we haven't had anything like that, I don't think, since. In terms of a product that's come along and revolutionised a whole industry. That was the last time it happened back in 82.
Yes and no, in so much as it took longer because it happened in a staggered sense. But essentially the ability to network and communicate to external sources of information has drastically altered IT, AV, all sorts of other bits and bobs. It just took a little bit longer because I think the differentiation is that CD arrived as an up and running set of standards and capabilities, and then when DVD arrived, the same, and Blu-ray and so on and so forth. Although Blu-ray had to do a quick format war, whereas now we receive very early examples of a technological breakthrough, and we then spend a couple of years honing it into something everyday and workable. And I think that's possibly what we're going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future. And CD is an odd throwback to being given something which was developed, completed, and ready to go, albeit expensive, heartbreakingly expensive at the very start. The one thing I personally feel, and I guess I'm coming at this from the position of someone that never really liked the format terribly much. I've never had a problem with the way it sounded. I just don't really like CDs. I personally find network audio to be something I much prefer using. So I don't mourn the end of the 7-inch disc in the same way that I guess a few people will, but it's ultimately you can get exactly the same performance and better performance with what we currently have available. It's just obviously the delivery systems are a bit fragmented, but it still sounds the same, if not better.
Yeah, it's a testament to the technology that it's stayed around as long as it has as a physical format, and we are coming to the end of the physical formats. There's no doubt about that. Now, we've been decrying this for a while, but it's eventually going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight, like you say. It's going to be a slow and gradual thing. And the thing with CD and with most optical disc players and that kind of thing is the life of the players and when the manufacturer stops at that. Now, surprisingly, I learned recently that VHS was only killed off very recently.
Yes,
because they were still making the components and the parts for that until very recently. So it's going to be a long time before we actually do see the death of it. But if you're looking at mainstream product, if you're looking at mainstream hi-fi product, which you were at Bristol, how many CD players were there?
There weren't many. Essentially, it hinges on a couple of companies. Tayak and its subsidiaries, they have voiced an intention to keep going with optical because they're very, very good at it and it's cost effective for them. They intend to be the sort of last people standing. And what's interesting about that is that they intend to be the last people standing, both in terms of plasticky little things, but then also the continued construction of those extremely high-end VRDS mechs as well. But there are still other people churning them out. I mean, Yamaha went to the effort of designing their own mech about 10 years ago, and there are no apparent intentions to knock that on the head. DNM, the Marantz Denon group, they have their own. So, I mean, there's still plenty of people that consider it to be worthwhile. And it's interesting with Asian home brands, CD is still a big deal across Asia. They've not really taken to network audio with any lasting enthusiasm. So for as long as there's, a credible reason to keep going, there's going to be no sense of people cutting their noses off to spite their face. And in exactly the same way, whilst it will be harder to walk into bricks and mortar premises to buy CDs, they are the perfect online retail item because they're light, very robust, and ship extremely well. So again, there's no great issue there. We're just, as I say, going to see it peter out.
I guess the interesting thing is, for me, was reading your streaming article, because there's no doubt that is the future. That's where the things are going. But the interesting takeaway that I had from that and from the comments, and thank you for commenting on that. It's interesting to see what our listeners and readers think. So if you have got comments, please do keep them coming. 48 people have replied to that so far, Ed, and overwhelmingly the attitude seems to be yes, bring it on. But at the same time, a lot of people don't want to make the move or switch, or those that have actually ended up buying more CDs or vinyl as a result of listening to things streaming wise and then thinking, I like that, I'm going to go and own it.
Well, I have long found this. I call it the Babylon Zoo effect, because it means you get, if you're buying vinyl, especially in 2018, it's expensive. It is an extremely expensive pastime. Streaming services allow me to eliminate the risk of buying something because I heard one track on the radio.
Yeah.
Actually, the rest of it turns out to be dreadful. And the reason I call it the Babylon Zoo effect is because those of us of a certain age will remember Spaceman from the Levi's commercial, where they played the 30 seconds of the song, which was absolutely blinding, and stopped before it turned into the absolute shit fest that was the rest of the single.
Yeah.
So streaming services have been an absolute godsend for that. But equally, I know plenty of people who have, they switched over, and, the idea of them buying it, because music is a filler. It's an intangible. There's no need to own it, and that's absolutely fine. There's space in the family for all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, a number of people. I mean, it's an interesting argument for artists umming and ahhing about being on streaming platforms, because, as I said, one of those 48 comments is me. There are a number of bands whom I have invested heavily in their physical music, having first encountered them on streaming services, and that's a loosely measurable phenomenon. What is definitely a measurable phenomenon is being on streaming platforms, being brought to consumers' awareness. Now, they might not buy your music, but they sure as hell will go and watch you live, and that is also a measurable effect.
The point you made about Bristol and there not being any or hardly any players there is absolutely true. I guess that also reflects the fact that there are lots of devices that can play a CD other than just a CD player. I mean, I haven't used a dedicated CD player for a long time, because if you buy a Blu-ray player or an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, they also play CDs, as do any number of other devices. So I suppose there's plenty of ways of accessing and playing your CDs, even if you don't have a dedicated CD. I know there are people who say, well, I want a dedicated one, because for whatever reason, but it's a digital signal, so I'm quite happy with another source.
Yeah,
but
I guess what else I was getting at there, Steve, is that these all-in-one systems that are extremely popular at the minute, how many of them have actually got a CD mechanism built into them? There's very, very few, isn't there, Ed?
It's interesting. Yes, I will be reviewing an all-in-one system this month. I'm doing 2 all-in-one systems, but one of them has that rarest of objects, a CD mechanism in the front of it. And do you know what? I've used it to play a CD to confirm it works, and then otherwise completely ignored it. So, yeah, it's a funny old one.
I still like buying CDs, although admittedly I do just rip them and then probably don't play them very often as a CD.
See, I find that really annoying these days. If I need a digital file, I will go to great lengths to buy it legitimately as a lossless or high res, and not have to stow the silver disc, because it's just pointless. If I want physicality, I'll buy it in big on a big pointless analog format. So I guess that's where that's the differentiation. But digital these days, I get really annoyed if I have to buy the CD.
I'm surprised you haven't gone the whole hog head and gone reel to reel. And,
no, I'm sorry.
That's for serious collectors.
It sounds phenomenal. I've had some demonstrations reel for it, and but it is just so expensive, so impractical. And
I couldn't believe how expensive it is. I mean, it's 20 grand just for a decent reel to reel machine, and then 500 quid for a highly recorded.
Well, that's from people like the Tape Project who are extracting the Michael somewhat. It is possible for it to be a bit more cost effective than that, but it's everything that audiophiles love. It's wildly impractical, expensive, complicated, and elitist. It ticks every box.
Yes, absolutely. I watched a video on YouTube, and it's fascinating to see, because I didn't know that world existed. Although I had my suspicions that it did, but yeah, you can see where your true audiophile nitpickers go, is definitely there, because it's vast sums of money. It almost reminded me of Laserdisc.
Yeah, I mean I mean the thing is, if we're talking, if you want to be objective about this in terms of available bandwidth and sonic performance, measured sonic performance, it's up there with the very best. The very, very best that it is possible to achieve via digital. Let's be clear about this. It is a reference format. It's an impractical format, but it is capable of reference performance in terms of signal to noise, all those things. So there is, at the root of the insanity, there is a very slight kernel of reason, but it's then dressed up with, as you say, enormous costs, massive impracticality, and just a general sense of, oh my god, you're really going for this, aren't you? So yeah, it's not a rabbit hole I'm going down, but best of luck to people that are.
I still like CDs.
Oh, that's nice. Do you still buy it?
I do. Again, a bit like Steve, I tend to rip them and then store them. But I was thinking about getting a CD player actually recently, because I have found that with streaming and with having digital files, it's completely changed the way that I listen to albums, and I'm just not listening to complete albums anymore, and that slightly annoys me. I know it's my own attention span, but it's just so easy just to kind of skip ahead and find the song that you like, or stick things on shuffle and that kind of thing.
Yes, yeah. I do appreciate that. I think that's one of the sort of the pleasantries of vinyl, is that you do tend to just let it ride. But equally, I know people, not necessarily with streaming services, but certainly as network streaming people, who are just perfectly content to let stuff roll. I mean, I do tend to sort of bat about my collection when I'm using network audio, but that's as much because I have the use of a different format that I treat differently. But it's more of a conditioning thing than something which is absolutely guaranteed to happen if you start doing it.
Annoyingly, the last CD I bought was the Last Jedi soundtrack.
Why did you bother? You just listened to Empire Strikes Back, it's the same.
Yeah, but I didn't know that before I bought it, did I? To be honest, it's a collection. I've been collecting this stuff since for 40 years, so it's too late for me. It's just too late. Save yourselves, but it's too late for me.
Yeah, okay. Have you bought The Art of Han Solo yet, or Solo?
I've ordered it.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's too late for me. I'm finished. I just shoot me in the head now and have done with it. But save yourselves.
Right. Okay. We'll be back in a sec with movie news. Okay, so moving on to movie news and reviews. I think we're being hopeful, calling it reviews. Been to cinema, Steve?
I have not been to the cinema, but I have watched this week Murder on the Orient Express and The Death of Stalin. So I've got three billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri,
which is not getting a 4K UHD release in the UK. So I shall be buying that as well.
Yes. That arrived yesterday, so hopefully I'll get a chance to watch it over the weekend. Interestingly, because Kaz just reviewed the US release of Coco, the new Pixar movie. I mean, it's only just come out recently in the UK cinemas, but it came out earlier in the US, so the discs just come out. But that's not getting a 4K release in the UK either. Although, interestingly, it is getting a 3D release, but it isn't getting a 3D release in the States. So clearly they consider 3D to be more of a market in this country and not 4K, and 4K to be more of a market in the US and not 3D. But Disney have been doing that quite a lot recently. I noticed a few of their 4K titles, Cars 3, Coco, and Pirates of the Caribbean. None of them got 4K releases in the UK, but did in the States. So they just released, Thor Ragnarok, and they've got obviously The Last Jedi coming out on the 9th of April, I think it is in the UK. So, but that's interesting, a slightly worrying trend. I don't like that some stuff isn't coming out in this country at all, forcing you to have to import. But the good news is, of course, that there's no regional coding, so that's not really an issue other than any cost associated with importing it.
Yeah.
But I did watch Murder on the Orient Express, which looks absolutely stunning on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray because it was shot at 65mm and it was a 4K DI, and it looks gorgeous. Sounds great too. Really good Dolby Atmos soundtrack. Although, if you've seen the previous film or read the book and know the plot, it's a bit unfortunate because obviously it diminishes the enjoyment of the film because. Although it's wonderful, very competently made by Kenneth Branagh. He's a good director. He's great as Poirot. He's got a fantastic cast. But the whole point of a whodunit is whodunit, and if you know whodunit, it's not as entertaining. But I thoroughly enjoyed The Death of Stalin, which was really funny, and surprisingly historically accurate as well. But that was really funny. I watched that last night and I was in hysterics. And apparently, I was reading about it afterwards, and Amanda Iannucci was saying that they had to tone down some stuff because if they just told it as it actually happened, no one would believe it. But the cast is great and it was really funny. So I recommend both of those highly, particularly if you haven't seen the previous version of Murder on the Orient Express. If you're fresh to it, don't know who the killer is, then you'll thoroughly enjoy it, and it does look superb.
So let's dial it back and let's go to the cinema. Films come out this Friday if we're going to go and use our limitless cards.
You got two choices. Peter Rabbit, which I've seen the trailer for, and I should imagine that Beatrix Potter is turning in her grave. It looks dreadful, if only because the voice of Peter Rabbit is James Corden, which is enough to put you off going to see it in the first place. But it just looks dreadful. We've got a modern take on the whole thing, and just avoid like the plague. And also coming out this Friday, Tomb Raider. So they're rebooting Tomb Raider now with Alicia Vikander playing Lara Croft. So less of the big boobs and tight shorts and more of a slightly PC take on the whole thing. I cannot believe it's been 17 years since Angelina Jolie put on the shorts and T-shirt, but apparently it was 17 years ago. And they're rebooting it. It looks okay in the trailers. I've got to say, it's not something I'm massively interested in. I think most video game adaptations don't work, but she's a good actress, and if they can give it an interesting spin, it might be worth checking out.
Okay, so I guess I'll go and see Black Panther then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or anything else, really.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple I need to catch up on, and and I'll buy those UHD Blu-rays that you're on about. I actually bought Dark Crystal, Mark.
Ooh, well, I managed to get to the cinema twice this week. So
did you?
Oh, yeah, wow.
Okay, wow, there you go. Right. So Mark's going to do his reviews. What's the first one?
Black Panther.
Okay, your take?
My take? Just a standard comic book film. You know what?
You didn't change your world, but some reviewers seem to be claiming, it's the most important film ever made, isn't it? Apparently.
You know what? I really, really liked the fact that it felt like a fantasy, that it wasn't just the standard kind of, clean-cut white boy in kind of, a city that may as well, it either is New York or is called something different, but essentially is New York. That's your standard superhero fare. It was nice to have different imagery, and I very much liked, how they took the kind of, African influences and a futuristic African idea. But at the end of the day, you still end up with a film where your protagonist is the most boring person in the entire film. The bad guys are the best ones, and I ended up rooting more for Andy Serkis You know, there was, I don't know, it just felt a bit vacuous. You know, it was enjoyable enough, but the final fight sequence, just, they should have had it against like a big African backdrop. Instead, they have it as part of the kind of futuristic rail track. And you just think, why use that? You know, there are a couple of really good action sequences in there, but you know, Andy Serkis, the woman who plays, I forget her name, but the kind of chief of the guards, you know, there were a few kind of supporting actors who really stood out, but the central character was just a bit too dull.
I thought Michael B. Jordan was very good as the main villain. I think, and also he had a good backstory and a good motivation. And in fact, actually, to a certain extent, I thought he had a good point.
No,
he may not have been going about it the right way, but I think actually, you know what, he's got a point.
Yeah, it does that thing which a lot of Marvel, a lot of the Stan Lee characters do, which is you end up with a fairly dull protagonist, and the antagonists actually have a really good backstory and that kind of thing. A bit like, you know, kind of Iron Man 2. You end up thinking, actually, I'm kind of on Mickey Rourke's side here. You know,
Dr. Octopus was really good in Spider-Man 2. That, you know, you felt, you actually kind of sympathised with the guy and realised that, you know, he's at the mercy of his tentacles as much as anything else.
Yeah, and it does seem, you know, it's a little bit kind of confused in that I know a lot of people are saying, you know, it's great, and it was fantastic to have this kind of pretty much all black cast, and that was really good to see. But at the end of the day, you've got this futuristic kind of African nation that's, you know, got all these advancements in technology and medicine and things like this, and they're still choosing their king by trial by combat. You know, there's something a little bit, you know, I don't know, a little bit strange there. But yeah, the supporting cast was excellent, and you know, I just found it a little bit confused in places, like, you know, the Martin Freeman character, a CIA man, the nice CIA man. I mean, I admit I'd seen it not long after, watching Sicario on TV, and so that kind of swayed me a bit. But you know, your CIA man doesn't tend to be the good guy. You know, it just, it was interesting. It was fun. It's visually very good. But I don't see, you know, reading a lot of the hype coming up to the Oscars, people were saying, oh, Black Panther doesn't, you know, it won't get nominated this year and this kind of thing. And I'm thinking, is it going to get nominated next year for anything? You know,
Did Wonder Woman get nominated? It did, didn't it? I think.
Yeah, I think it did.
I mean, again, it's kind of like Wonder Woman. I enjoyed Wonder Woman, but I don't. It's not going to cure cancer. It's just, you know, it's just a movie. I think it's just because, you know, because Wonder Woman was a predominantly female cast, directed by a woman. It got, you know, I think it got more credit than perhaps it necessarily deserved. And the same thing's happening with Black Panther, which is because it's set in Africa and it's got predominantly black cast and a black director and writer. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of critics like lauding it. Yeah, it's a thoroughly entertaining film, but you know, it's not going to cure cancer or change, you know, create world peace. It's just a Marvel movie at the end of the day. Can you all calm down a bit? So
just solid superhero fun. That's all it is, and all it really was aiming to be. You know, I think it got kind of caught up in a lot of other things. You know, swept up in this idea of change in Hollywood, and it's kind of been elevated to something that it, you know, I don't think it ever really intended to be in the first place.
No, I think it might have an impact just because it's massive box office. If that's an indication of, you know, the amount of potential for an all-black cast of a movie set in Africa, then maybe they'll make some more, and that'll be a good impact for the film, because it's making an absolute ton of money, particularly in the States. It's really coining it in. I think it's the second most successful Marvel movie now, except for the Avengers. So it's absolutely, you know, raking in the cash. So if that, it could have a positive effect in that sense, which would be good if it does. In the same way that it'd be good if Wonder Woman has a positive effect for more female-led movies, which would be good to see.
Okay. What was the second film, Mark?
The Shape of Water.
And what was
it? It's kind of like Amelie meets E.T. if Elliot had the horn for E.T.
And they had sex in the bathroom.
Yeah, I heard it called Beauty and the Bestiality, and I think that's...
All right, we'll leave it on that.
Steve, did you see that? Steve, did you see that picture I sent you?
Yes, I saw the meme you sent me. Very funny.
And why were everybody else left out of this?
Because I didn't know if Steve was the only person. I should have sent it to Botwright, because I don't. Steve, you haven't seen it, have you? Or have you?
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh, all right, fine. Because I didn't know if anyone else had seen it.
All right,
so it just, you know.
So that was favouritism.
And I did obviously like your Lonely Island Oscars thing. You know, I heard a lady rode a fish man, which has been in my head for some time.
I am so glad Lonely Island are back. I've missed them. And there's a special on Netflix that Michael Bolton. It's like a Valentine's thing, but it does the acoustic version of Captain Jack Sparrow song. It is so funny.
Because that is a legitimate special he's doing for Netflix, right? Normal.
Yes,
special.
it was a Valentine's thing. Oh, it was written by Lonely Island. The whole thing, it's a spoof, right from it's a Valentine's thing. It's a spoof. It is really, really funny. It's really well put together. And if you like Lonely Island and you like their music videos and that kind of thing, and he buys into it completely, and he sends himself up, and it's just fantastic. It's really, really good. The thing is, their movie Popstar, I've never seen it.
It's very, very, very good. I thought it was extremely well observed, and some parts of it were properly funny. I mean, my favourite Lonely Island moment, though, years ago was at the Monaco Grand Prix. And obviously, all the boats in the harbour. Massive props to the person on the super yacht playing "I'm on a Boat" by Lonely Island at proper, with my flippy floppies. It's like, yes, you are doing exactly what I would do in your position, and I salute you wholeheartedly for you.
Have you seen the Natalie Portman rap?
I know of it. I haven't seen that one.
Part 2. It's uncensored. It was shot by the Saturday Night Live crew, but it was done by it's a Lonely Island thing. It's really, really fun. Natalie Portman sending herself up. It's brilliant. Although it's not office friendly, so do not play it in the office. F's and C's and all sorts. But it is really, really funny.
Let's be honest, Jizz in My Pants is still one of the finest records ever written, to be honest. Proper banging tune as well. So, it's got
but what was the other one with Justin Timberlake? There's a couple of videos.
Thick in a box.
That's really funny.
I love Lonely Island. Anyway, we're getting way off tangent here, but we're going to come on to the Oscars, so we'll come back to that. But right, disc releases this week, Steve.
Disc release this week. We've got some good ones, particularly Paddington 2, one of my favourite films of last year, and that's available on Ultra HD Blu-ray as well as Blu-ray. And because Mark's just told me, and I know this because Mark ordered it on Amazon, but somehow managed to use my account, so I suddenly turned up on mine instead. It's available on Ultra HD streaming with HDR from Amazon as well, if you fancy that instead of buying the disc. So that's out. Great film. Really enjoyed it. A really good sequel. And Hugh Grant steals the show in that movie, and it's worth every second of the time he's on screen. Also available on Blu-ray is Only the Brave, which is about firefighters fighting a forest fire. True story. Which should look and sound great with a good soundtrack, a bit like Deepwater Horizon, but only available on Blu-ray. And also available on Blu-ray, the Florida Project, about a young mum and a daughter living in a motel just outside of Disneyland in Florida, which has had very good reviews. Although the director's previous films have been very low budget and shot on iPhones, I think, this is actually shot on film properly, and it looks really good on disc. And Kaz thought it was excellent. So that's available as well this week.
Okay. UHD-wise?
A couple of announcements coming up. We've got a brace of Spielberg movies, basically. We've got The Post, his new film, which is coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray on the 17th of April. And then the big news is that Saving Private Ryan is coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray on the 8th of May. That's got a brand new 4K. They've scanned the original camera negative, new 4K transfer, 4K DI, Dolby Atmos soundtrack, and Dolby Vision as well. So that sounds great.
Post kind of bombed, didn't it?
I don't think it was ever going to do big box office, to be honest. I think it'll make an interesting. I actually picked up on Blu-ray after The Post came out. I picked up All the President's Men, and I thought I might watch them as a double bill sometime. Quite good, because they're kind of about the same things and involving a lot of the same people.
So some really decent catalogue stuff coming up though, UHD-wise. So Saving Private Ryan there. Also noticed that we discussed it briefly last week with Braveheart and Gladiator. And hopefully it'll be a decent transfer on Gladiator. Braveheart looks great. So we're getting some decent stuff coming through now. And of course, if we're getting The Last Jedi, there is hope that we may actually see the original trilogy stuff coming. So
yes, fingers crossed. We might get something.
Stupid.
Well, I'd much rather have the original trilogy stuff than The Last Jedi. So
with Disney buying Fox, that makes things a lot easier, because I know Fox had distribution, but Fox also actually owns Star Wars. Because they made the film, it's not nothing to do with Lucasfilm. So them Disney buying Fox means that Lucasfilm will now have absolute control over every aspect of the Star Wars back catalogue.
Yeah. Okay, so moving things along swiftly because we are up against it again, running long as we always do, and I'm blaming Ed. So what did we think of this year's Academy Awards? To be perfectly honest, I didn't watch them, although I got the news report the morning after, and it didn't seem like there was anything really to shout home about other than Deakins finally got his Oscar. Well done. He's thoroughly deserved that one. After such a long run of making some beautiful looking films, he gets it for Blade Runner, so well done. Was there anything of real interest, Steve? Because I think it kind of went the way everybody assumed it was going to go.
Pretty much went as everyone expected. I think certainly the acting categories all went exactly how they were expected to go. Oldman, obviously, long overdue for an award. I don't know if his performance in Darkest Hour is his best, but he's definitely been due one, and he won as everyone expected. And the same goes for Frances McDormand in Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. She won her second Oscar, and Alison Janney, for her great performance as supporting actress in I, Tonya, as Tonya Harding's mum. She won, and everyone was expecting that. And also Sam Rockwell, again, an actor I've always really admired. I'm glad to see him win something. He won for, again, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and again he was the hot favourite. So that all went as expected. Guillermo del Toro, really delighted that he won Best Director, because he's a cracking director. He's been making some brilliant stuff over the years, and to see him being recognised is great. He's also, interestingly, it's the fourth time in the last 5 years that a Mexican director has won the Best Director Academy Award, because it was won by Alejandro Inarritu, who made The Revenant and Birdman, won twice, back to back actually. Also, we had Gravity, so Alfonso Cuarón won for Gravity, and then Guillermo del Toro for The Shape of Water. The big surprise for me was that The Shape of Water won best film, because it's not the kind of material that the Academy normally rewards with a best film win.
Maybe they're all a bit like Troy McClure. Obscure Simpsons joke there, but yeah. Because
it was a fairly decent group of films that were nominated. I mean, things like Dunkirk and The Post, as you mentioned. Three Billboards, I thought might have an outside chance, because it did win the BAFTA Best Film, and also Lady Bird's getting a lot of good reviews, and could have won perhaps of being the less divisive film of the group, because The Shape of Water isn't the easiest film to watch, isn't it? It's challenging material, to say the least. But that was a bit of a surprise, although it was still the favourite, because it won pretty much everything else. Otherwise, though, everything, even the other stuff, I was delighted to see Roger Deakins get Best Cinematographer at long last, after how many nominations. And speaking of nominations, I think John Williams has something like his 57th nomination for The Last Jedi, and then announced that he's going to do Episode 9. That's it. He'd be done on Star Wars films. So this is going to be his last. He's retiring from scoring Star Wars movies after Episode 9.
He's not retiring full stop, though.
Well, I think he's going to wind things down, because he's into his late 80s now. I believe he'll still do scores for Spielberg films.
We're just bits of childhood are sort of falling by the wayside. Being recorded this on the Friday, tomorrow, Saturday, so it will have happened by the time you listen to this, is John Motson's last live commentary for 5 Live. And I don't get that dewy-eyed about football, but Motson is the sound of football.
Has he not said this before, though?
Well, no, he announced his retirement, and he will continue to do segments for Match of the Day until the end of the season. But this Saturday coming is the last time that you could listen to him do a live commentary on 5 Live.
All right. Well, end of an era there.
Yeah. I know. So, to be honest, I always preferred Barry Davis. I mean, Barry Davis football, because Barry Davis used to do everything. There was just a worldly wisdom to his football commentary. His Euro 96 commentary, some of the best football commentary there's ever been. Just perfect.
Okay, so let's just take it back to the Oscars, just to finish off the Academy Awards, just to finish it off. It's interesting, WikiLeader does list all the runners and riders and the winners for each year. So I thought it'd be interesting just to see how many of the Best Picture, so not the nominees, just the Best Picture we have seen as a group. I know Steve will have seen the most, but I'm not expecting many people to have seen the movies in the 20s, the 30s and the 40s, to be honest, because I went through there and I didn't count any of them. It wasn't until the 60s that I actually started counting. So out of 90, I've seen 42, which I thought was alright. Not a great deal, but it's okay. Nearly 50%. Ed?
28.
Okay. Mark?
Although that said, I have seen ones in the. I've seen Casablanca and Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, I'd seen them as well.
Yeah, who hasn't?
Yeah,
You know,
you can't avoid them on the TV at Christmas. That's the thing with those ones. Mark,
39.
39, good number. So I'm assuming that Steve's going to have over 50% here.
65.
Yeah.
Films, not percent.
Yeah, but he watched Casablanca at the cinema.
Yeah, there is that. But it's interesting because I mean, this is supposed to be the prominent awards ceremony for the film industry, and yet I think if listeners were to go through that list as well and actually be honest with themselves and count the ones that they've actually seen, I think the majority of them would be around about 50%. I think. You're maybe going to have your somebody that's maybe done film studies or whatever that's seen all 90, but I don't think it's ever been a major indicator of must-watch movies, has it? Really?
Didn't Lonely Island do the song about it as well? It does. They never seem to nominate or award generally
popular
films. Titanic is an obvious example of one that did. Return of the King. It happens occasionally, but a lot of the stuff that gets nominated and wins. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, how many people saw Moonlight?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's a great film. I haven't seen it. But this was my cup of tea. But most of the films, if you also look at the box office of a lot of the films that win Oscars, they tend to be very low down the list. Again, Titanic is the sort of the outlier, isn't it? Because it was not only was it wildly popular, but it actually also won the most Academy Awards, or equaled the record set by Ben-Hur.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, generally they tend to pick sort of arty films. And that don't necessarily get watched by a lot of people.
Or films that celebrate Hollywood, La La Land being a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Also, there's some strange winners in there, aren't there? I kind of forgot about Crash winning. Yeah. Or even No Country for Old Men and Slumdog Millionaire and The Hurt Locker. I mean, the noughties.
The Hurt Locker is an absolute box of bollocks. I hate that film. Just as an aside.
Yeah.
There's some $1 Million Baby. I've forgotten about that.
Yeah. Although it was interesting in 2009 because obviously Catherine Bigelow won for The Hurt Locker and James Cameron lost out for Avatar.
To his ex-wife.
Yeah, to his ex-wife.
And she's also the first and only woman to have been awarded the Best Director Academy Award.
Yeah.
To date.
So it's never been populist, but is it a case of the old boys club dying out and we might see some fresh blood? And certainly with the current movement in Hollywood with the whole equality thing and women being given bigger roles and places within studios and that kind of thing, could it be that there is a bit of a change in terms of and it becomes a bit more, because I guess the way you don't want it to become too populist, because then it becomes a Brit Awards, doesn't it, or something like that. So it waters it down, I suppose, a little bit, or does it?
I don't know.
I don't think you care.
There's no balance. Perhaps. I mean, the thing is, it does become a lowest common denominator thing if you start taking box office into account. But equally, this determination to be willfully obscure is also counterproductive. There's no easy balance. The thing is, you have to feed the Oscars into a selection of other awards as well. It's one of those things. It's still the big one. It's still the one that everyone wants to win. But it's easier to see a pattern across multiple awards than just who got the Oscar that year. So that would be my take on it. But I guess I'm the wrong person to talk to because I don't really enjoy watching films at the moment. So it doesn't matter if they win or not.
If you were to pick up a film and it had Oscar winner on it, would you watch it? Would it make you want to watch it more than one that didn't?
No. I don't, not personally. I mean, it does impact their box office, doesn't it? When a film gets nominated, it quite often does quite well at the box office, or if it wins, it will see a box office boost. However, that's more because people probably haven't heard of it at all until it gets nominated and think, oh, I'll go and check it out. But I guess there's a certain degree of cachet associated obviously with winning, and they put it on the boxes and this sort of stuff, and winner of however many Academy Awards. But at the end of the day, awards are kind of silly, aren't they? How can you say one film is better than another film? The Shape of Water, I enjoyed it, but looking at the list of nominees for this year, I would say I thought Get Out was a better movie. I thought that Dunkirk was a better movie. ultimately than The Shape of Water. So it is very, very subjective, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it is. And on that subjective note, I think we should subjectively finish. What do we subjectively think of that?
No, I think I should objectively finish because I have other things to attend to.
I think Ed needs to go to the loo. Right, so that's it for this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
So time to say the unit. No, I'm going to do that again. So time to say the universe again, then, is it?
Not getting an Oscar for that one. Ed Selley.
No.
This isn't a country; it's an ice cube.
And Mark Botwright.
I think it's really cool that you still have a day job.
Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video, and of course leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.